Greetings, YouTubians, and welcome back to Wayne Sharp World, where today we're going to be taking a look at the WE Knives Black Void Opus. Now, this is a knife that really had my attention from the get-go, from the very first pictures I saw of it. This is a Justin Lundquist design, and when the first pictures were released and there was a little hype being thrown at it, this is way earlier in the year, Elijah Isham kind of just congratulated him and said, Justin, congratulations on designing the knife of the year. So I heard that, and I thought, between Elijah Isham and Justin Lundquist, two of my favorite, in my opinion, two of the best front-flipping knife designers, I thought that was pretty high praise, and it got me pretty excited about it. And then I heard it was going to have a chisel grind, which we'll talk about here in a second, and I wasn't too sure about that. This knife has a lot going on, a lot of really good things. I'm just still wrapping my head around it. I have a pretty good idea what I think of it, though, and this is a knife, for me, that is going to be a prime example for a long-term review. I think this is going to be a very, very good one for me to carry around and really get some time with. And speaking of long-term reviews, I know you guys, a lot of you guys really like the long-term reviews I do. I haven't done any in a while. I've got 3 episodes of long-term reviews coming your way this week. I've really stockpiled some knives. I haven't had the chance to sell many of them, so it's given me time to carry them, get a little more thoughts into them. So there are some long-term reviews coming your way. So stay tuned for that. And if you like what you're seeing here, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and follow along. I'll continue to keep bringing you guys the long-term reviews, the original reviews, all sorts of different stuff. Some good content coming your way. So please hit that subscribe button. Now let's get into this knife. Let's take a look at some overall specs. We have a blade length of 2.84 inches, a close length of 4.02 inches, an overall length of 6.86 inches, with blade material being 20 CV, with a blade thickness of 0.125 inches. And this is a drop point blade, which, like I said before, this is a chisel grind. So there's one side of this blade is flat for the most part, and the other side has a grind on it, or we'll call it, I think this is a flat grind, but there's only one side that has actually been ground, the other side is flat. That is what a chisel grind is. It's not super common in the knife world, I think, because a lot of people are a little turned off by it, but I've got some things to say about that. We have a stonewash finish on the blade and a handle material of black titanium with twill carbon fiber inlays. We have a handle thickness of 0.52 inches with a very nice nested liner lock for the locking mechanism, with a pivot assembly of caged ceramic ball bearings and a titanium pocket clip that is right hand tip up carry only. As I said before, this is designed by Justin Lundquist. He's pretty well known for his front flippers. The Kaiser Feist is another very, very popular one from him. And we have a weight of 2.75 ounces, and a total price is $225.25. So this is not cheap. This is not cheap at all, and I'm not 100% sure on the price yet, but I don't have any big problems with it right up front. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. And now, let's do some size comparisons. Let's see here. Let's start off with the Civivi Elementum, as well as the WE Knives Banter. Kind of some keep it in the WE family here as we get going. As you can see, the Opus is much more slender, but overall length is pretty close to the Elementum. It's a little shorter than the Elementum, and the Banter is just in there for a good comparison, or a good size comparison of just how the size of this knife, I guess. Of course, that's right there. But yeah, this Opus is very, I've been using the term a lot lately, but I also consider this a very medium-sized knife, small, medium, somewhere in between. Here we have your TRM Atom, as well as your Benchmade Bug Out. And as you can see, again, pretty close there. The blade on the Opus just isn't anywhere nearly as long as either of the Bug Out or the Atom. 2.84-inch blade. It's just, yeah, it is what it is. I wish it was a little on the longer side, but not the end of the world. Still all comes together very nicely. Here's a couple that go very well with it. We have the Civivi McKenna, as well as the Enrique Pena X Series Barlow front flipper. So as you can see, these guys just don't want to stand up well at all. That may not be the, well, here. Well, so there's the McKenna. And so as you can see, there's pretty good comparisons right there. All front flippers. The Barlow, there we go. The Barlow and the Opus have something very important in common, and I will touch on that here in just a second. But there you go for some size comparisons. Now, let's get into this knife, because I got a lot to say about this one. The blade is so incredibly unique. As you look at the show side, this is the flat side of the chisel blade. There's a very nice swedge up here. And chisel grinds, I think one of the reasons chisel grinds turn a lot of people off is they're really kind of boring to look at on one side. There's, on a regular blade, you have the nice grind line and just a little more to look at, so there's a little more going on. But on the chisel side, there's just, it's usually just boring because it all looks flat, just like this. Then insert that swedge up there, and again, I don't think the swedge makes a real big difference in performance whatsoever. I may be wrong. If I am, let me know, but I don't think I am. I think this is more just for purely aesthetics and a little weight reduction, but it does look so much better. The swedge really goes with the top of the handle. It just really streamlines the looks and the lines together, and it really does pull the knife together aesthetically. And it's not a huge thing to add, but it makes a huge difference. So I really do like that one a whole lot. And the blade is centered perfectly. That's another problem people have is, the OCD in some people. You may not think that it just looks weird because all of the grind is going to one side. Therefore, the front of it kind of pulls your eyes over to think that the blade is way off centered. That is not the case. As you can see, this blade is centered perfectly. And the only way you can really tell is by looking at this bottom line along the flat of the blade. And as you can see there, it is centered perfectly. Centered perfectly, it's just fine. That's how it's supposed to look. I wasn't sure how I felt about that myself at the very beginning, but it makes absolutely no difference. The blade is on point. It's centered. No blade play whatsoever. Very nice, quick lockup, and it just works very, very well together. The jimping. This is where you start to get, I don't know what is going on with my focusing. The jimping is where this knife is really kind of makes itself such a fantastic front flipper, as you have it here compared to the Barlow, the Pena X Series front flipper. Again, this is that jimping I'm talking about. Look at the texture there. It's perfect for just biting, gripping your finger, and deploying the blade effortlessly. Absolutely effortlessly. It works very, very well. And we will get even more into that when we get to the action of this knife. But the chisel grind. So everyone may say, "Oh, it's a chisel grind." I don't know. I don't know about chisel grinds. I always thought the same thing too. I was never a really big fan of them myself. I actually had one that was a ProTech, and I sold it because I just couldn't really get used to it. Wasn't a huge fan, but then I wanted to give it a second try, and I thought this would be the perfect knife to do it with. And I did a little review here on chisel grinds because I really didn't know a whole lot about them. Now this information came from EmersonKnives.com. A chisel ground blade possesses greater strength due to increased cross-sectional mass. So with that being said, instead of having the grind on just one side, the flat side offers more structural strength and stability, so in turn should give you a tougher blade. They also cut with an ease not found in any other type of blade due to the flat side not having any dragging points, and that actually makes a lot of sense because, as you know, on the ground side of a blade, there's obviously, whether it's flat or hollow grind, there's still going to be a point right up here as to where you're cutting. and it's following up the blade, it's going to hit that dragging point. The Chisel Grind does not have that on this side. It's totally flat, so everything just goes straight. The Swedge is just kind of an optical illusion. It just is actually going in. So it goes straight, and you have less drag as you're cutting. And lastly, they're easy to sharpen because you only have to maintain one side of the edge. Obviously, I guess the edge is just one side, but what's the best way to put it? Yeah, I'm just going to say one side of the edge. I don't know the proper terminology, but you guys know what I'm talking about. You just sharpen this right here, and this side you kind of just let it be. I don't that's also going to be something I need to learn, though. I feel like you still need to give this a little light strop or something to where, like, you know, as you're using it, it still may roll or you know, dull the edge to where it needs a little maintenance on this side. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm gonna have to find out when I go to sharpen this thing someday. But I gotta say, out of the box, the edge is very, very good. I had readings of anywhere from 13 thousandths to 14 thousandths behind the edge, and that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. So no issues there whatsoever. Going into the ergos on this guy, the ergos are decent. They're nothing great. They're decent. I would give it maybe a 7 out of 10. While the ergos aren't the best ever, the overall design of the knife really is killer when you really look at it, and it's pulled together by, like I said, the Swedge up here on the blade and all the lines all over this knife. There's nothing too crazy or too wild, but it's just, again, a very, very well executed job of on the fit and finish. The inlay of the carbon fiber is done very, very well. Don't feel much of a transition from the carbon fiber to the actual titanium part of the handle. Just no fraying, nothing sticking out. Very nice and clean job. I also like how the black wash on the edges of the handle kind of dim a little to kind of give it a little bit of a distressed look. I think that looks pretty good. And the carbon fiber is a very nice carbon fiber. It's ground nice and smooth. Nice pattern in the grain of the carbon fiber showing. So nothing to really put against it on the fit and finish. The only thing that I'm not a huge fan of is this pocket clip, but for one reason and not necessarily another. So obviously this clip is designed very well to go over the thickest of jean hem, which is very nice. You know, some pants have much thicker hem than others. As far as going over and going into the pocket, this clip works great. But it's also raised enough to the point to where I think it could be a hot spot for some people. I could definitely see it being a hot spot. Now, it's not necessarily a hot spot for me. Again, I got all sorts of calloused hands, so it kind of presses right up on one of my calluses, so don't horribly bother me. But anyone that has a little softer hands or different size hands or any kind of different things could be an issue for you guys, because it sits up pretty high. Higher than I think it needs to. I wish this was just a little lower profile and maybe a little smoother around the sides. It is chamfered pretty well, but it just sits up so high. You really do feel that in your palm. Not, I personally wouldn't call it a hot spot, but I think some of you guys probably would. So just throwing that out there. Even without the opening to access the liner lock, it still remains very easy to access the liner lock while you're closing the blade. Again, how many knives do you see have the little cutout there to where you see that little, that's not an imperfection, but you know it's there to get the liner lock. They didn't do that on this knife. They kept it nice and smooth, and you can easily access the liner lock, and it falls right shut. So they did a very good job at making that look nice, but also still be very, very accessible and very effective. And now going into the action on this guy, the action, in all honesty, the action on this knife is as good as any front flipper I've ever handled. I'm not saying it's better, because I don't think it's better, but it's just as good. It is just as good as this Pena. It is just as good as the Kaiser Genie, which is another one that I hold very in high regards for super smooth action. And it's also the same as the Wingman EDC that I had in a video on just a few days ago. it's just super, super smooth. And the liner lock drops it right down, but this jimping. So you have a few things going on with this jimping. One, it's textured just right. As you can see, to me, that is perfect front flipper jimping texture. It's done just right, but even more importantly, it's placed just right. It's not placed too high, it's not placed down too low. And it covers a good range to where I can get just the top of it, and it flips out pretty fast, gives a nice click, and then I can do the front of it, and it still comes out, and it comes out just as effectively, but it actually sounds a little different, and I think that has to do with how the tension's dispersed on the bearings and stuff as you're spinning it. I don't know exactly, but it definitely sounds a little different as you flip it out on different spots, because it comes out a little softer there. That was my fault. But it comes out just fine there. But, you know, you get it right towards the top, right up here, and it just flies right out, and it feels really darn good. And it's really, really, really hard to mess a front flip on this. Again, this is another one to where the detent, it's done just right. You can do the reach around just fine, and it flies right out. The detent is not too strong. It's still very present. You can't shake it out. And this is about as hard as I shake a knife out, guys, because there's so many knives where, yeah, if you violently threw the knife around, yeah, you could shake the blade out, but that doesn't mean crap. At the end of the day, that means absolutely nothing. So that needed to be said. Because front flippers do have a slightly softer detent. Some of them do. I'd say almost majority of them are supposed to have a softer detent to make the front flipping enjoyable and easy. But you also want it strong enough to where, yeah, the blade's not just going to fall right out. This actually has the detent, like I said, it's really just right. It's just right. It's just crisp enough to be present, and that's all you want on a front flipper. So very, very well done there. But then also how the jimping is raised. Look at that. It's raised up plenty high enough to where it's not too close down to where you really have to, you know, press your thumb down. No, you just put it on and flip it right out. You don't have to think. You don't have to think to use this knife. You can just use it rather easily, and it comes right out, and you can do it all day. Again, this knife's pretty expensive, so I wouldn't necessarily call this a great beginner's front flipper. But again, if you're comfortable with that level of that price of a knife and you want a front flipper, this is a good one to try. If you like the way it looks, if you're attracted to it aesthetically, then it is a good one to try because it's very effective and it's executed very, very well. Overall thoughts, they're all really pretty positive. I'm struggling to not love this. I'm still, it's just so, it's different. It's a very different knife. And I'm also starting to get really irritated by the focusing issues with my stupid phone. I don't know why. It's not working right. But no, overall, the thoughts are very, very positive. The price at $225.25, that's high. It's high, but it's not out of line. I think it could be a little less, though, in all honesty. I kind of wish it was a little less. But that's not to take away from the actual execution and performance of the knife. As far as the design, the materials, the action, the quality and fit and finish, I love it. I really do love it. I'm just starting to come to a point to where, I don't know, $225.25 I think is a little too much for this knife. I also don't plan on selling this knife, though, because I want to carry this one a lot. I want to carry this one a lot and use it a lot and see just how I think of this Chisel Grind. This is kind of me giving the Chisel Grind a second chance there, which I think it deserves. So we're going to give it that. Going to see what we think of it. And I may just throw this phone away after the video and buy another one so I can get you guys a little better images here. There it goes. Good God. It's starting to piss me off. But anyway, so outside of all that, I really just wish the pocket clip was a little lower profile, and I also wish the maker's mark was a little smaller because the maker's mark on this guy is pretty big. It could definitely be smaller. I actually don't mind it being there, which is pretty rare for me. Usually I like it up on the flat, off the grind, but I don't have a big problem. I think if you made it smaller and brought it up there, or just made it smaller and kept it right there, it'd be fine. It's pretty big on a knife of this size. It's pretty noticeable. I honestly don't. I love Justin Lundquist's designs, and I think he's an extremely talented designer, but I don't want to see any maker's mark that big on my knife, just me personally. But overall, this is a very, very nice knife. If you guys have been thinking about it, I think it's worth giving it a try as long as you're okay with the price. Like I said, I think that could be a little lower, but that's not really here or there at this point. It kind of is what it is. But that's it. Another excellent front flipper design from Justin Lundquist. The guy is, he definitely knows his front flippers. I would really like to see a larger design from him, a bigger blade, like a 3.25 inches or 3.3, whatever, something right around there. That would be very tempting. I think this knife alone in a 3.25 inch would be very tempting, but this is also just fine the way it is. I really am a fan of it. I like it a whole lot. If you guys give this knife a try, I hope you like it a lot. Let me know what you think, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and until the next one, I'm out.